This week on the Hollywood and Toto podcast, well, Howard Stern hasn't been canceled yet. But here's what the media is getting wrong about the story and how Howard is only himself to blame for the predicament he's in right now. And we talked to author Scott Johnston about his new book, The Sandersons Fail Manhattan. If you're sick of New York stories, if you're sick of that identity politics mindset, this is the book for you.
Welcome to the Hollywood and Toto Podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Robin Quivers made fun of my name once, and I couldn't have been happier. This was back in the mid-90s. I was working for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, and I had a semi-regular humor column in the publication. Now, I would riff on different things in the culture. Once in a while, I'd actually pay homage to people in my life, including a dear friend who had committed suicide. It just was a forum for me to kind of just weigh in on almost anything I wanted. I had a lot of freedom, and it was great fun. And then one week I thought, you know what? I should defend my king, the king of all media, Howard Stern. I was a loyal listener back in the day, listened every single day, even collected cassette tapes of the best of Howard Stern. And at the time, the media really hated him, loathed him, couldn't wait for him to get off the air.
You disgust me.
But I was different. I was like one of many, many fans who just loved the work he did. It was irreverent. It was crazy. It was unpredictable. It was raw. It was honest. And of course, often very funny. Not for everyone's tastes, but I was A-okay with it, and I wasn't alone. So, wrote the column, and then one day I clipped it out of the newspaper. I know, talking old school stuff, but this was back in the 90s, and sent it to his team. I thought, hey, never know, maybe he'll see it, get a chuckle out of it. Well, apparently he did receive it, and maybe he did get a chuckle out of it, but more importantly, he read it on the air.
Can you believe it? Oh my God.
Toto, Robin Quivers said, calling out my name and making fun of me. With a name like Toto, you get a lot of that. And of course, Howard rushed to my defense. Oh no, back off. He's trying to defend us. And I was. I defended him. And he read the whole thing on the air, or at least most of it. It was surreal, to say the very least.
Is this really happening?
That was then, the mid-90s. Love him or hate him, Howard Stern ruled terrestrial radio. Today, not at all on terrestrial. He's on Sirius XM, but this Howard Stern that you can listen to now is nowhere near the Howard Stern that I grew up listening to. Not even close. This guy's woke, and he's soft, and he barely works. He works 3 days a week on a good week. On a bad week, he's on vacation, or he's taking the summer off. You know how some teachers take some parts of the summer off, and God bless him for that? Well, he takes the whole summer off. Good gig if you can get it, right?
I need a vacation.
Clearly the fire is gone. It's just not there anymore. He just isn't who he used to be. I remember back in the day, he'd make fun of Don Imus, who was his older rival. And of course, he would make fun of Don Imus and say, oh, he's past his prime. He's become a shell of his old self. Well, Howard, have you seen a mirror lately? Because that's exactly what you've become. And it's sad. Maybe the worst part came during the pandemic. He became obsessed with it. He couldn't get the virus. No way, no how. Even though, yes, he was in his late 60s, but he was in good shape. He was thin. I'm sure he was pretty darn healthy. He probably would have just shrugged it off like most people of his age and of his health situation. Oh no, he was obsessed with it, and he hunkered down. He was basically a hermit for years. And he would do his show from his different estates, and he still does that to this day. In a way, COVID broke Howard Stern, along with Donald Trump. But let's not even get into that. The bottom line is that Howard Stern changed. Now, listen, you can't throw bologna slices at strippers your entire life. You get older, you get wiser. You can't do the same shtick that you did in your 30s and 40s. So I was okay with him changing, but when he traded in his old values for these new superficial values, that's where I had a problem.
I don't even recognize you.
I mean, this guy was Mr. Free Speech in the 90s, and now he couldn't say a peep about cancel culture, about other things going on in society, about sensitivity readers. He bragged about being woke. He actually bragged about it. That is not Howard Stern, not the one I knew for years and years, and not the one that I defended. So now his future is in jeopardy. Now the media keeps saying, oh, he's canceled, he's done, he's over. Oh, no, he's not on multiple levels. His contract with SiriusXM does end at the end of December. Now, what happens next? Well, SiriusXM has been giving him gargantuan contracts, but he just isn't worth it anymore. They don't reveal the numbers about how many people listen per day. The New York Post has had some. I don't know if it's official. They are embarrassingly low. This is not the king of all media I grew up with. So there's that. And of course, he doesn't have the clout he once did. So he may not be able to accept a contract that isn't equal to what he signed in the past. We don't know what the future holds for Howard. He could go solo like Tucker Carlson. Well, push aside Tucker Carlson's his own transformation for another day.
What the hell happened to him?
Or he could try podcasting on for size. The future is his in a sense, but his moment has passed. He has passed. No matter what he does, he missed his window. He had the chance, like some of the other greats, to go out on his own terms, to write his own finale. You think about Seinfeld, the great sitcom. Well, that show didn't go on, and then we got bored with it. The ratings drooped, and Jerry and company said, we're done. No, they went out on their own terms at the height of the show. John Hughes, the great director, he started to lose his fastball, and he stopped making films before his death. I think on some level, he sensed he just didn't have that spark anymore. And instead of making more movies and collecting paychecks and kind of resting on his laurels, he said, you know what, I'm out. Or the great Barry Sanders, Detroit Lions great, he stepped aside at 31 years old. He hadn't declined, at least from a physical point of view, but he was done. He wanted to go out on his terms. Howard could have done that, but he missed his window. He should have done it years ago. He is no longer Howard Stern in any recognizable form. And it's sad. He actually dubbed himself the king of all media, and it stuck. Well, this king deserved better. He really did. I got an email a few years ago for a book called Campus Land. I hadn't heard of the book. I hadn't heard of the author, Scott Johnston, but something about it seemed interesting. It was a book poking fun at college campuses, about what's going on in universities across the country. How could I not read it? And it was good. It was very good and funny and insightful. And I thought, it's about time someone wrote a book like this. We need it. Now, Scott Johnston is back with a new book, and it's just as vital, just as necessary, and just as funny. It's called The Sandersons Fail Manhattan. It's a story about a family, a very well-to-do family in New York, and the patriarch is on the cusp of greatness. He could be one of the power players in the city, the kind of position he always dreamed about. But there's one problem. He's got to kind of solve one little puzzle piece in his life, and then everything's going to fall into place. And it's not that easy. Now, this is the kind of story I don't want to give anything away because there's so many fun surprises here, but it does poke fun at New York City, the hard left, and of course, identity politics gone awry. It's very of the moment, and maybe in 20 years, we'll look back at it with a different lens, but right now, it's laugh out loud funny, it's smart, it's satirical, it's what we need. So I'm so glad to have Scott on the show to talk about the book, what inspired him, what other stories he may have up his sleeve, and how close the book's story came to reality. Spoiler alert, pretty darn close. Must be great when you're reading the headlines and think, oh, there's my next chapter of my book. Well, that's kind of how Scott did it. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation with Scott Johnston, the author of The Sandersons Fail Manhattan, in your favorite bookstore right now. Good stuff, funny material. And boy, why aren't more people writing this kind of satire? Well, someone did, and God bless him for that. Well, Scott, thanks for joining the show. As the author of Campus Land, this is perfect material for you. But let's just get the origin story out of the way. I can't even imagine how many real life stories impacted this novel. But you tell me how this all came about and why you thought it was such a perfect novel for our times, because I think it is.
You're talking about Sandersons now, or Campus?
Yeah.
So Sandersons, I was actually working on a novel about the art world, which can never be satirized enough. but I was having trouble coming up. Still having trouble coming up with how it ends. So
Yeah.
it's sort of sitting on my shelf. And I was beginning. This was now the summer of George Floyd and the BLM riots, and in New York City, I noticed that fall when the private schools all came back into session, they had been radicalized over the summer. I mean, crazy stuff. The full critical race theory implementation, George Floyd worship, giving kids time off to go protest, abandoning the search for truth and sort of the foundational tenets of Western civilization for a social justice agenda, and dividing the kids into oppressors and oppressed, and I'm sure you know the whole routine. But what struck me, I began to blog about it. I have a blog called The Naked Dollar, and one insider at one school sent me a bunch of documents about what was going on. It was the Dalton School.
Oh my.
Very well-known school in New York. And there were 8 pages of demands from the faculty and administrators, and they were insane demands. Getting rid of AP classes because the BIPOC students weren't qualifying for them in equal numbers, rerouting 50% of the donations to the school to the New York City public school system. There's 8 pages of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I wrote about that. The blog went berserk. That piece and subsequent pieces had about 1 million hits over a few weeks. And then the Wall Street Journal asked me to do an op-ed about it, which I did. And then the Dalton headmaster got fired. But everyone else started writing me about their schools. Like, please write about us because we're going insane too, and we don't know what to do about it. And I did. And I then had a habit of, at the end of each piece, I'd list the board members of those schools. And as if to say, if you want to point a finger, point it here. These are the people allowing this radicalization to take place. And they are not radicals themselves, but they're letting it happen. They're like, sheep. The amount of moral cowardice going on was remarkable. Because they were afraid that, little Brittany still hadn't gotten into Georgetown. I was really struck by this, and then I was in a situation. It was a meeting where a woman was being considered for something. I can't be too detailed about it, but she actually was the head of one of the boards of the schools that I'd written about. By the way, 3 of the schools took the names of their board members off their websites after I wrote about it.
Courage, as Dan Rather would say.
And everyone just loved this woman. And I said, well, I don't know her, but what's happening at her school gives me serious pause. And I think 2 or 3 people all at once said, oh, she's perfectly lovely. And I'm sure she is, right? I'm sure there's a very successful woman, and I'm sure she makes the finest of dinner party companions. And I was struck by that phrase, lovely. And then I realized I got obsessed with this idea of the lovely people. The people allowing this radicalization to happen just because they're going along with the flow. Yeah. That was the working title of the book, All the Lovely People. I realized there was a novel in this, an Upper East Side fable, kind of son of Bonfire of the Vanities in a way. St. Martin's Press didn't like the title, All the Lovely People, which I still love. But they didn't think that sold books. So the title of the book became The Sandersons Fail Manhattan. You're supposed to wonder who these Sandersons are and why they're failing. So anyway, that was the impetus for the book. And then it kind of wrote itself. Yeah. And I had fun with the whole transition.
It sounds like the people writing you these missives wrote the book themselves. Okay. that downplays your creative expertise, obviously. Yeah. Well, actually, I grew up in New York. I left in my mid-20s, haven't been back, in any sort of significant capacity. But can you just share your New York roots? Because they're so integral to the story. I'm just kind of curious about your background from that perspective.
I grew up on the Upper East Side. I went to the Buckley School, which is an all-boys school, and pretty well known. And then I went off to boarding school, as most of the kids did, and after that, Yale, and lived in New York City until I started having children. Then we moved to the New York suburbs, and now we're out of New York altogether because it's just an untenable place to live. We live in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Gotcha. I was just curious because it really does feel like this is something you really know instinctively. But what's happening in New York City that you share in the book and all the escapades and all the social complications, it's not isolated to New York City, obviously. Can you talk about that a little bit? Why, often we hyper focus on New York City. I get it. It's a great city. It's, I get all the reasons. I'm from there, but it's not a vacuum. It's sort of maybe the arbiter of what's going to be happening elsewhere.
Well, it tends to spread, and I ended up writing about schools outside of New York City too, on my blog. It's all over. I mean, generally speaking, the further south you go, the more or the less the impact of wokeism is in our schools. But that doesn't mean that they're completely immune. I mean, there's some schools in Atlanta, for instance, that have completely gone to the dark side, and that's pretty far south. On the college level, the further south you go, the safer you are. I had a son just graduated from SMU, and that was every bit the college experience that you and I probably had years ago. And there was zero politics involved in the entire thing. I went to his graduation. There was no politics at that. It was great. But the further north you go, the less it is like that. The Northeast is hopeless. You can't go anywhere there. But New York is still is still a fascinating place because it's intertwined with the money culture, and there are all these new cultural rules with the DEI struggle sessions and the privilege walks, and other crazy things that make the upper crust, and all these new rules make a very awkward pair. And that's what's fun to write about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intertwining nature of all this, and why it's so much cowardice is because if you step the wrong way, you say the wrong thing, your financial structure comes crumbling down, and people don't want that by any means. And even if they may recover, they don't want to go through that process. And I understand it, but it also is cowardly. You mentioned that all the feedback you got from that initial blog post, and how you kind of get people writing into you and sharing these things. As you're writing the novel, did you turn on the news or look at your smartphone and think, oh my gosh, this is going in the story? I mean, I imagine there sort of maybe was an ongoing potential flux of inspiration for your book.
Oh, sure. So if you write social satire, you have your ear to the ground. It might just be for a clever phrase. Like the other day, I heard someone describe someone else as emotionally incontinent. Wow, that's really good. I'm going to use that. But there was a subplot in Sandersons where Will Sanderson, the patriarch of the Sanderson family, he's about to ascend the corporate mount, the executive committee at Bedrock Capital. But he's got one thing he's been tasked to do first. They've gotten this giant request for a proposal from CalPERS, the biggest pension fund in the world, and they've never been able to crack that nut. And one of the questions on the RFP, as they are called, is, and this is typical of RFPs now, how many LGBTQ plus board members do you have here at Bedrock Capital? And plus counts too, plus big category. They have one board member that they're pretty sure is one of those letters, but he's never talked about it. So Will Sanderson is tasked with going in, because he went to Andover and Yale with this particular board member. He's tasked with going and confirming that he's one of the letters, so they can check that box on the RFP, and it leads to a whole comical subplot. And so that's a story that is absolutely true and was told to me by a friend of mine who is the CEO of a big money management company. This precisely happened to them. He had an old friend on the board who he was pretty sure was gay, but the friend chose not to talk about it. So, like, what are the ethics involved in a situation like that?
Yeah. Amazing. The key to satire is it has to ring true. It can be fantastical. It can kind of press the boundaries a bit, but if the core of it isn't true, then it just doesn't hold together. And obviously, so much of what you're doing here does. Is there describe maybe the push and pull of that process where you want to kind of get satirical and sometimes you have to exaggerate for comic effect, but you got to kind of keep the roots of the story true. Just tell me your process, or is the world today so so crazy that you don't even need to even think about that as a mathematical equation?
Well, the challenge is satirizing things that are self-satirical.
Mhm.
And where I sometimes get criticism with my two novels is a few people think the satire is over the top, and what they don't understand is that most of the stuff is 100% pulled from reality, and some of it I had to dial back from reality because I didn't think people would even believe it in a satire. And
Yeah.
I'll give you a very precise example. In
Great.
Campus Land, the villainess in Campus Land was the head of DEI at a Ivy League-like college located in Havenport, Connecticut. You could draw your own conclusions. And she, I had to decide how many people were in her department, how many reports did she have? And I thought, well, I started with 20. And then I went on the Harvard and Yale websites to actually find out the real number of DEI people. And it was not there. Couldn't find out the information. And I thought, this is satire. I'll make it 30. Only when the book came out did I find out that the correct number at Yale was 150. Now, if I put 150 in my book, people would have said, "Come on, that's ridiculous. You're way over the top." So people don't understand, unless they're really paying attention, just how crazy and absurd some things have become in our culture.
Yeah. That's fascinating. This is an interesting moment in the culture because I'm mostly a movie person. I do books now and then. Obviously, when I saw you had a new book out, I jumped on it. But there's two movies that are coming out either now or very soon that really kind of poke the bear when we talk about woke. One is Eddington from Ari Aster, and it really is explosive at times. This is set in May 2020 about BLM, about protests, about mask mandates, and it's uncomfortable at times when you think about the humor involved. And there's a new movie called Ick. It's a horror comedy, and that too really kind of pokes the bear. Now, you've been doing this for a while, but you've been doing it in a way outside the mainstream. You're not like you're not like Stephen King. Do you get the sense that maybe things are changing, that maybe it's starting to be okay to do the kind of work you do and the satire you do?
They're out flogging Campus Land right now with the streamers, so it may still get made into a
oh wow
a streaming series. It's Hollywood, so I'm not going to get excited till it happens. But and I have reasonable hopes that book number 2 will get optioned anyway. I think, well, you had the ESPY Awards the other night. I forget who the comedian was who did the intro.
Shane Gillis.
Yeah, he started out by saying, so Megan Rapinoe couldn't make it tonight. Nice. And he was great. And, so they're definitely, people are dipping their toes back into the waters comedically and otherwise. And so there definitely has been a bit of a swing back. We have a long way to go. I mean, this is the 3-4 years ago, I would get asked, isn't this just a pendulum and won't it swing back? And I said, well, my standard answer was sometimes pendulums are wrecking balls. And this one is looking like a wrecking ball to me. Will destroy everything before it can swing back. And maybe, and Trump gets a lot of credit for this, maybe we've been saved just at the edge of the precipice and it swung back just a little, which is very encouraging to me. I haven't heard of those two movies, but I will check them out. I would also point out a movie called American Fiction, which was absolutely hysterical and brilliant, I thought, and deserved more recognition than it got.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's interesting. This is sort of a lofty question, but what kind of a role does humor play in this? Like you mentioned American fiction, which was celebrated, didn't get as much mainstream distribution as you'd like. But when you have that in Eddington, the work you're doing, I mean, if the late night shows won't cover this kind of topic, but other people will. And one of the reasons why I think rebel comedians have had a moment right now is because they're telling the jokes that are out there, need to be shared, but aren't being shared. I mean, can humor, make a dent in the pop culture?
Well, it has to. Famously, was it Andrew Breitbart who said that politics is downstream from culture?
Yeah, yeah.
And where the left has been incredibly effective is really the culmination of the long march through the institutions, which was a concept that came from an Italian Marxist named Antonio Gramsci in the 1920s. And the reason the whole concept came to be was because the communists in the 20s were really upset that the proletariat around the world weren't upholding their end of the bargain. They weren't rising up and seizing the means of production. They had no interest. So communist revolutions became really about elites. But Gramsci came up with this idea that, well, really we need to play a longer inside game now, and we need to take over the institutions. And the ones they keyed on were the ones that had maximum cultural leverage. So what does that mean? That means entertainment, that means education, that means media. Those three things. And they were incredibly effective at taking over those three areas of our society. And from those platforms, they really gained almost full control by 2020. Elon kind of saved us by buying Twitter.
I agree.
A comedian who made conservative jokes as recently as a couple of years ago, like pre-Elon, was in danger of being deplatformed. And getting deplatformed was the death of your career because you had no way to get your voice out. And now there are ways to get your voice, which seems incredible in the age of the internet. Like, of course you can get your voice out. Well, no, you can't if you're not on one of the big platforms.
No, I mean, I've talked to comedians who had their work censored or canceled or diminished. And often it wasn't outrageous or bold or vulgar. It just was. It was funny. So, yeah, I agree.
Someone just wrote a friend of mine just texted me. They tried to leave a review of Sandersons on Amazon, and his review was dinged for hate speech. And he's like, I didn't write. There's no hate speech. He couldn't even figure out what he'd put in there that was hate speech. But he says he tried to rewrite it and submit it again. But
oh my gosh.
I did want to interject before I forget that anyone of your listeners who are listening to Sandersons, Audible has screwed up massively, and the novel cuts off with 20% to go. And the moderator cuts in and says, "We hope you've enjoyed this presentation." You think that it's over.
Oh my gosh!
This kind of sucks. This story just ended there. It's really frustrating. Audible's known about this for a week. Audible is Amazon, and they've done absolutely nothing about it. And I'm sort of pulling my hair out. Although I did have one woman come up to me last night and say she thought the ending was brilliant, and she
Little No Country for Old Men esque, where the ending is so obscure that maybe it's a genius in some way. Well, when you get the final word on that, when it's fixed, definitely share it with me. I will spread the word on social media that it's been updated. But for now, we'll give the official plug at the end of our conversation. But maybe check out the a different version, a more finished version before at this moment. But it's so interesting that you're doing what you're doing now. You're not a 20-something coming at these kind of topics. You've lived a life, and you're kind of a late bloomer as far as not being a novelist is concerned. Talk a little about that. I mean, part of me always is amazed by people in their 20s who write these rich, vibrant novels full of life and wisdom. I'm thinking, gosh, when I was in my 20s, I couldn't do anything. But you came at this a little bit later in life. I imagine it's extra sweet, extra interesting. You feel like you're maybe better armed to kind of tackle the world. What's your take on it?
Well, it's kind of fun to have a complete reinvention. And it never occurred to me to be a novelist, honestly, until
Uh-huh.
various events just forced my hand. I had to write Campus Land.
Uh-huh.
Um, Novels were something that someone else wrote,
Yeah.
and they seemed like hopelessly complex endeavors. I mean, you have to have a plot, you have to have subplots, they have to weave together and resolve with each other at the end. You have to have characters, and the main characters have to have backstories. There have
Mhm.
to be plot twists, and just describing it right now makes my head hurt. Um, and honestly, I had no idea. Well, part of me also wanted to solve the mystery of how it was done, because
Mhm.
I'd always, if you read a great novel, you think, sometimes you're left wondering, how did that even come to be? So I
Yeah.
wanted to solve that mystery for myself, and I'd like to think I did. Although after I wrote the first one, it almost felt like the mystery was slipping away from me again. So I wanted to prove I could do it again.
Uh-huh. Well, it's funny when I read something like what you wrote. I dabbled in fiction when I was in my 20s in college, and I kind of gave up on it. Part of the reason why is I would read like an Updike or a Vonnegut and think, I can't do anything like that. And I got that sensation for your books. Like, this is great, but I couldn't do this. I'm glad I'm reading it and not writing it. So just a quick testament to your work. You mentioned that art novel you were kind of fiddling with. Is that something you could revisit? It seems a little bit more evergreen, perhaps. I mean, I'm hoping that this story the Sandersons Fail Manhattan is an evergreen that we've kind of looked back on this with a laugh one day. But what's on your plate next?
Well, we've got two half-written novels. The
Okay.
art novel, which is kind of a comedic novel where the mob somehow gets tied up with the world of contemporary art. They sort of like what they see. They're like, well, why aren't we in on this racket? I mean,
That's
we're
great.
trying to make money in all these hard illegal ways, and these guys are doing stuff that seems like it should be illegal, but it's not. So we
Uh-huh.
want in on this. That's sort of the setup.
Yeah.
And then I'm also working on, my heart's kind of in this other one though, a road novel.
Mhm.
I've always loved the road, road trips, the wacky things you see out there in America. And so I'm sending a couple of brothers who don't like each other, forcing them to go out on, they're forced by circumstances of the
Mhm.
father's death and the father's will. They have to go out on the road and solve
Uh-huh.
some mysteries. And so I'm kind of poking at that one.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Gotcha. I had one last question for you. Would you kind of tipped off in the last part of your answer? You said you thought it was a puzzle that you were curious to solve. You never thought of yourself as a novelist, but here you are with two very good novels under your belt. Was there a moment, a switch being thrown, a moment you thought, you know what, I can do this? Like what? And I say that in part because I want the answer. I'm curious, but also there may be a lot of other people out there who maybe have a great novel in them too, and maybe they just need the key. What was the moment where you thought, hey, yeah, I'm going to do this, and or maybe I can do this?
Well, don't think you have to figure out a whole novel in advance. It's kind of like great music too. I'm a big music, I'm a classic rock guy.
Mhm.
So, you hear one of those incredible old songs and you wonder like, how did that come to be? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
it came to, if you watch the Beatles documentary, Get Back,
Mhm.
there's they're all at one point sitting around, they're noodling on their instruments, and Paul McCartney is playing his Hofner bass like a rhythm guitar.
Mhm.
And he's just sort of mumbling and playing notes, and all of a sudden you hear the song "Get Back" kind of come into life. And initially it's just a couple chords and some mumbled sounds, and like, wait, that's "Get Back." I think I recognize. So these things all start with a little kernel. And
Uh-huh.
when I started writing Campus Land, I thought I could like lay it all out on file cards, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I got to about the third file card, and I was like, I can't do this.
Mhm.
And that's not the best way to write a novel. So if you get it started, and things will develop for you. Things come,
Mhm.
plot twist might occur to you, and then you can go back and seed it. Characters, you sort of grow with them, and you learn their voices as you write them.
Mhm.
And part of it is just sort of sitting down and writing and seeing what happens. And so I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but
Mhm.
part of it's just showing up.
Well, I mean, I think you're also saying that it seems too daunting to have the entire thing mapped out. But if you kind of attack it piece by piece, that your imagination takes over and it kind of grows and the whole creative process blossoms from there, which is sounds easier than having those note cards in front of you.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, I hope people do check out the new book, The Sandersons Fail Manhattan, available now on Amazon or your favorite bookseller. But just a quick warning again, that Audible version has a bit of a hiccup in there. So maybe hold enough initially, maybe try the other versions because you want to read the story. It's very funny. I was telling you off air just via email. I was waiting for my kids' hockey game to finish, and I was laughing in the middle of the hockey waiting area, and people were probably thinking, "What is he doing over there?" But I was reading and laughing at your book. Very funny stuff, and even not the laugh out loud stuff. Just the humor throughout is precise and darn near necessary. So I do hope people check it out. Scott, I hope we talk again about your next project, and congratulations. And I'm glad this second career is blossoming like it is. Keep on going.
Thanks so much.
Your character actor of the week is James Hung. Before we sign off, I want to mention a few quick items. One, I hope you'll check out Short on Hollywood. It is my ongoing series. You can find it on my YouTube channel, and I do post it on Instagram and Facebook and also on Twitter from time to time. But it's a under a minute look at the latest headlines with a particular snarky point of view. Sydney Sweeney's American Eagle jeans ad is slammed as Nazi propaganda by the left. From the river to the sea, Hitler jeans will be free, they cried. And yes, it's right-leaning. It's often silly, certainly fact-based, and it's something I don't really see out there in the mainstream, and that's why I created it. So I make it at least once a week. I'm trying to go for two. We'll have to see if I can get my production schedule up to speed. But for now, I work with my son, who's the video editor, making it all look interesting, making those sound effects pop off the screen. It's kind of fun to work with your son on a project like this, but do check it out. It is Short on Hollywood, and the best way to find it is on the Hollywood in Toto YouTube page. And also do check out HollywoodInToto.com. It's my website. We operate it 7 days a week with all the news and reviews you could possibly want, like this show, from a right of center perspective. We don't own the libs. We don't make fun of the libs. Well, maybe a little. We certainly don't hurl personal attacks on the libs. We just tell it like it is from a right of center perspective, because look around. Very few people are doing just that, especially not Variety or The Hollywood Reporter or Deadline or The Wrap or the New York Times. You get the drift. Well, again, thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Doctor's orders.